So in this video, I'm going to be giving my thoughts and review on The Suicide Squad. Spoiler free. This movie is a sequel to Suicide Squad from 2016. Although the term sequel is used very loosely here, because while it is in the same continuity of the first film, there is very little story relevance to the first Suicide Squad in the sequel, to where you honestly don't even have to see the first Suicide Squad to understand or enjoy this film. And that's for sort of good reason, or a good thing in this case, because Suicide Squad, the first film from 2016, while not without its moments, it is not a good film at all. You know, it's got an awful story, a terrible Joker, an atrocious villain in the Enchantress, a terrible final act. Yeah, it was just a very poorly done movie overall that did not live up to the fun that those trailers hyped it up to be. Pretty much the only thing that I liked in that film were the portrayals of Deadshot and Harley Quinn. You know, they were both pretty well done. The rest of the film, really not a big fan of. But there was actually enough good stuff in the film that people did enjoy to where I think they thought a sequel is worth doing. So that's why this one is directed by James Gunn of Guardians of the Galaxy fame, the director of Volumes 1 and 2. And his style and sensibilities seem to be the perfect match for ideally what a Suicide Squad should be all about and what it should bring to the table. So in this film, the Suicide Squad are tasked with uncovering something known as Project Starfish, and there's some other foreign government interference plot working along with it. So the team of Suicide Squad that we get in this film is sort of a mix of the ones we saw in the previous film, but also it's mostly an entirely new set of characters that we get to follow in this movie. All of that plot is really just an excuse for James Gunn to turn the film into his personal playground for absolute mayhem and craziness. You know, when you watch this film, you realize that, you know what, Disney really did hold him back from what he really wanted to do, because Guardians of the Galaxy is Marvel, so it's got to be family friendly. But the opening segment of this film just perfectly sets up the kind of violence, humor, and unpredictability that you can expect from the rest of the film. Part of that is properly playing off the name The Suicide Squad. You know, it's a group of soldiers that really are expendable to the overall mission of Amanda Waller, and yeah, they can pretty much get off at any point. That whole aspect of the expendability of the Suicide Squad was only briefly touched upon or shown in the first film, but in this movie, the Suicide Squad, they really go into it to show that, yeah, it's called a Suicide Squad for a reason, and any one of these members can get off at any moment. It's that unpredictable. That was actually one of the things I was disappointed with the film, is that there were some characters that I was looking forward to seeing that I really didn't get to see a whole lot of in the actual movie. You know, characters that were promoted in the trailers and the marketing that looked like they'd be fun characters to see, and I really didn't get to see much of because it's called a Suicide Squad for a reason. The characters that we did get to see throughout the film were overall pretty well done. I'll talk about the new characters first. First, there's Bloodsport. He's played by Idris Elba. And Idris Elba, I thought he did a good job. I think the problem with this character is that a lot of his arc and what he can do sort of mimics what we saw from Deadshot from the original film, who's one of the better aspects or one of the main good aspects of that film. Sort of what Bloodshot has in this film, or what he's given to do. His arc copies Deadshot, but overall I thought Idris Elba did a good job. Then we have Peacemaker, played by John Cena, and I'm honestly convinced after this film that John Cena isn't a good actor, but what he does, it actually kind of works. I guess it might be intentionally kind of hammy or just sort of like an awkward performance, but yeah, what you get from Peacemaker is pretty good in this film. It's entertaining at some points, but it's just kind of a weird performance that you get from John Cena in this film, but maybe it was intentionally that so. The characters that I think a lot of people were looking forward to, King Shark, the way he's used, he's very much the Groot of this film from Guardians of the Galaxy. Obviously, James Gunn wanted to use King Shark in this film like that. He's voiced by Sylvester Stallone, and overall, he's actually a pretty lovable brew. He's got some good action scenes, a lot of good gore. He's sort of on edge just because he's always sort of going after like to eat people, even members of his own team. So he was pretty cool. The character that probably surprised me the most was the Ratcatcher. This character, I was not expecting to be sort of as memorable or just as fun and just likable as she actually was. She actually had a really nice story. She had great interactions with the rest of the team. She was sort of the one that's sort of the glue of the team that really held them together. So she was overall very well done, the Ratcatcher. I actually thought she was sort of the standout character in this film. There's Polka Dot Man, who is Polka Dot Man. Out of the rest of the team, or the main new members, he's the one that isn't given really any depth. He's mainly just played for laughs. But I mean, it's fucking Polka Dot Man. What do you want from him? Then talking about the few returning characters that actually return from the original Suicide Squad. First, I'll talk about Rick Flag. In the first film, he was really saddled with a sort of really just awful love story with him and the Enchantress. I mean, that was just a terrible character. That and he was given just some of the worst dialogue you'll ever hear in a big budget film like that.
Our hearts out! We can end this!
Yeah, that was just awful. And this film is not saddled with that stupid love story. We get to see him more as just sort of like a badass and being just part of the team. So overall, I thought Rick Flag was generally pretty better in this film. Then you have Captain Boomerang, who is Captain Boomerang. I know he wasn't the most loved character in the first film, but this film it's all like, well, I guess they had to use him the way they had to use him. But yeah, it didn't really do much to sort of redeem what I thought of Captain Boomerang in the first film. Then there's Harley Quinn, who has really been sort of the standout character, the character that I think most people are sort of gravitate to in these films, the Suicide Squad, and even that spin-off movie she had last year, Birds of Prey. Once again, you get reliably good work from Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. She's just really good. Initially, Harley Quinn's story starts off kind of like, oh, where is this going? But overall, she's used very effectively, has a lot of good lines, has an amazing action sequence that was just fantastic. The way it was shot, the effects that went with it was so cool. So Harley Quinn was once again done very well in this film. Then you have Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis, and Viola Davis just plays this character so well as just sort of a stone cold like bitch, man, just ice cold. She does what she wants, gets what she wants. She doesn't care about your feelings. It's done really well. Amanda Waller, she was actually one of the better aspects of the first film, and she continues in this film just playing that character so well. With all that being said, the aspect about the film that a lot of people really sort of gravitate to or will be the memorable thing is that this is the most splatterific superhero film you will ever see. You know, there's just the amount of blood, gore, beheadings, slashings. It's just all over the place with this film. But that's what makes it entertaining in its action sequence, just that they were able to go all out with the R rating and just, like I said, make the most splatterific superhero film you've ever seen. Even more so than the first two Deadpool films. That's the level of violence that you get in this film. And God bless it for it, just because I love that we live in this age. We're able to get big budget R-rated superhero films like this, like Deadpool, like Logan, that just don't hold back and give you that R rating bloodiness that you want to see. When it came to this movie, I really think that the only thing that was sort of like a mixed bag for me was the actual story and I guess the mission. You know, I didn't feel like it was as, I guess you would say, straightforward as it really should have been. At points, it did get a little messy, especially in the middle. And I got confused, like, where is this story, like, really going? I understand this whole thing about Project Starfish, but in parts in the middle, it got a little more complicated or hard to follow than it should have been. Although at the end of the movie, it does become a little bit more direct, and you get what actually Project Starfish is all about. And the actual end of the movie, without spoiling things, it's pretty damn crazy. They really go all out with creating just this big, just climax. It's just like, whoa, really showcasing what each member of the Suicide Squad to do, giving them a big target to fight. It's really crazy, but done in a good way. Not like that bullshit final finale that you got in the first Suicide Squad with all of them fighting the Enchantress. I hate to just keep harping on the Enchantress, but my God, that was just an absolute terrible character villain, and it led to just an awful climax in that film. You get a much better climax in this film that's pretty crazy, pretty spectacular, gives you some nice big spectacle to watch. Overall, it definitely was not hard to top that first Suicide Squad film, but this movie did a good job of actually sort of listening to the complaints of the first one, really delivering on what a Suicide Squad film should do, the right sensibilities it should have. James Gunn did a great job sort of bringing that kind of stuff. Overall, I would give the film an 8 out of 10. You know, it was a really fun time, great stuff. It was definitely a very splatterific superhero film, but you got good characters and stuff in this film in terms of the main members of the team, good sensibilities of what a Suicide Squad film should be all about. And like I said, James Gunn, he really brought the right sort of stuff that a Suicide Squad film should bring to the table. So yeah, I would love to see another one. Hopefully the film, we can see another one, because I really enjoyed what James Gunn brought to the table with this film. Now, at the time that I'm recording this, I'm actually able to provide some commentary on the opening weekend box office for this film. This movie, The Suicide Squad, made $26 million in the US opening weekend. That is an absolutely terrible result. On a budget of $185 million, ended up doing $72 million worldwide. Yeah, that's just not a good result for this film at all. And it just had me questioning a whole lot of things. I mean, when you look at this previous summer, F9 did 70 million opening weekend. Black Widow did 80 million. And films that really should not have made more than this film on opening weekend. Space Jam: A New Legacy did 32 million. Jungle Cruise did 34 million. The fact that this movie, The Suicide Squad, only did 26 million, I mean, it has no business doing less money than Space Jam or Jungle Cruise. That's a crazy result, 26 million, that it was that low, especially considering that the first film, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think it did like 130 million or something like that. There was a whole lot of hype for that first film. So yeah, man, it just got me thinking about a whole lot of stuff, like what the hell went wrong with the opening weekend box office result, especially when the reviews are really positive for this film, the marketing was good, like what the hell went wrong? So I was thinking about it, and I went to 3 reasons in terms of why things might not have gone well for the opening weekend box office for this film. Reason number 1, the first film really sucked, and maybe that drew a lot of people away. A lot of times the sins of the first film will sort of go to what happens with the box office for the sequel. And because people did not like that first Suicide Squad, at least most people didn't acknowledge it wasn't a very good movie, maybe that made them turn away from this film. But I honestly don't think that's true with this one, just because the marketing and the promotion for this one did make it seem that it was almost sort of like a soft reboot of the first film, not acknowledging the first one, but sort of playing up on what the first film should have been. So I don't think that played a role with this film. The second reason that might happen is the new Delta variant that's been out for a few weeks or maybe a month now, whatever it is. Yeah, it's sort of wreaking wild now. There's sort of mask mandates putting back in places indoors. My job at Disneyland, you have to wear masks inside again now here in California. So yeah, that could be a thing. Maybe it turned people away from the theater. I can only speak to my experience when I saw this film opening night on Thursday, that in terms of the auditorium, it wasn't as packed as sort of the Thursday night viewings I did for F9 and Black Widow. So maybe that Delta is really sort of getting to people and is really making them say, you know what, maybe there's a safer option. But I think that the biggest reason that this film did not do better on opening weekend is 2 words: HBO Max, the streaming service that they're still doing. For people that aren't fully aware, that they're doing this bullshit thing where they're releasing their movies in the theaters, Warner Brothers in the theaters, but also having them available on HBO Max. The movies that have done that this year are Godzilla vs. Kong, at least the main movies, Godzilla vs. Kong, Mortal Kombat, Space Jam: A New Legacy, and now The Suicide Squad. And with this strategy, what they're doing, I have no idea what they're smoking with releasing these films in theaters and on HBO Max. Just because I just feel like they're just burning money left at the box office. I mean, Space Jam: A New Legacy did not get very good reviews, and yet even with the HBO Max thing, it ended up doing 32 million on opening weekend. Can you imagine if there was no HBO Max? It could have done maybe close to like 45 million or something like that. You know, this whole thing with releasing on HBO Max and the theaters at the same time, they're just leaving so much money on the table. And I get they had to do with Wonder Woman at the end of last year, just because there was theaters closed still all over the place. Now that theaters are back open, I really think that Warner Brothers needs to rethink this strategy, because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, this whole thing with streaming and the streaming in at home and in the theaters at the same time, I think it's going to lead to a whole lot of trouble, like what we're seeing with Scarlett Johansson and Disney for Black Widow. So I think Warner Brothers just really KO'd this film's potential at the box office with the whole HBO Max thing. Because if they continue to do this for too long, people are just going to say, screw it, I don't really care about the theater experience, I'm just going to watch it at home. Me, I'm always for the theater experience. That's why I saw this movie in the theaters, and I saw Space Jam: A New Legacy in the theaters. So yeah, the whole HBO Max thing, I don't really get it, and I think that's the sort of main culprit why the box office was so low for this film. All these different factors played a role. The fact that the first film sucks, the Delta variant, but I think this HBO Max thing is really like Warner Brothers is just burning money with the potential money that they're losing at the box office. So there's my mini rant on HBO Max there, right there. It's a nice streaming service, but I don't get this strategy of putting these films out, these theatrical films out there for free and having them being subject to piracy and losing money from repeat viewings and just losing money, period, by not having to pay for them. Like I said, it's not like there's Premier Access. You get to watch them for free. Makes no sense whatsoever to me. The money that they're getting from HBO Max, I don't think is going to make up the box office for these films, but hey, what do I know? I'm not the head of Warner Media and all that kind of stuff. So there's my mini rant on HBO Max and why this film didn't do as well as it should have done at the box office. It's a real shame, just because when you see a film like this that's crafted really well, what they did with it, how it redeemed the sins of the first film, and when it doesn't do well, you're like, oh man. And then bullshit like the first Venom from 2018 does like over 800 million, or the shitty Suicide Squad from 2016 did hell of a business, did like 700 million or something like that. It's a shame, but hopefully they can continue to do at least another one of these films, because I really like what they did with this one. So that'll do it for my review on the Suicide Squad and my little mini rant there, I guess it wasn't mini, it was a full-on rant. So if you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.